So Dilsun, tell me what motivated you to create these instructional modules for online learning?
So my course, Principles of Computing, as you know, is a course, introductory computer science course for non-majors. And most of my students have a steep learning curve.
Sure.
So any additional resource outside of lectures that let them engage with the material at their own pace is very beneficial. And the instructor before me had developed some online resources in the form of OLI modules, OLI Open Learning Initiative Platform of CMU. And these modules you can think of as units of online material. And the typical way we used them was to ask the students to complete one module before coming to the lecture, view their progress and identify the challenges that they are having, and then tailor the lectures accordingly. And I thought that this was a pretty promising approach, and I wanted to develop my own material with a richer set of activities, including programming activities, so that the programs could get automatically executed by the platform and the students could get feedback on. And there's one more reason I wanted to do this, because I thought it was a good opportunity for me to develop myself as a teacher. I know that developing material with OLI makes you interact with people with pedagogical expertise, like people like you from the Eberly Center. I thought this would also be a good learning experience for me.
Well, thanks. I think it's interesting that a lot of faculty are hired for their role as educators based on their research and expertise in the discipline, but they may not be expert in pedagogy, or they may not have a lot of experience creating online instructional resources. So we're happy to help work with subject matter experts such as yourself and help them to create the most effective online resources, but also make that an engaging process for you as an educator and sort of learning more about your students' learning process. And you're not alone either. In any given year, the Carnegie Mellon faculty represents a little over 1,000 people teaching CMU courses each year, and we at the Eberly Center work with about 1 in 3 of those faculty members. So we're happy to help, as we have, I think, in this case with the OLI modules for your course.
Yeah, thank you. You advised me all along, about getting my learning objectives clear and aligning my activities and assessments with those objectives. I really learned a lot in the process.
So one thing I'm curious about is how you think your students' experience has changed from before you had these OLI modules to now, when students can work with the OLI modules.
Right. I think it really changed for the better. For example, my first lecture on programming used to be hard both for me and for the students, because I had to start with some basics about programming to even get to the more interesting parts that I wanted to focus on. But in that initial part, I would lose most of my students. By the time I got to the point that I wanted to really focus on, the students would be thinking about other things. So I thought, for example, having one module on that material and asking the students to engage with that before coming to the class would be really helpful. And I experienced what I expected. They came to class ready to ask questions. The participation was way more. My experience is all positive, but I really want to go beyond these observations and just anecdotal evidence. We have all this data collected by the platform about the mastery levels of individual students, or collectively how well they learn the material. I would like to analyze this in a more scientific way, and I think this is a place that you can help me with.
Well, one of the great things about using online learning resources, especially with the OLI modules, as in your course, is that we have a way to instrument or collect data on students as they're learning. Mm-hmm. So we can go to look at the data online to see what your students have, how they've performed, what they've done. And remember, we also created a pre-test and a post-test, mm-hmm. so that we can compare students' performance before they used your modules to their performance after they used the modules. This can be really helpful because we can see how they improved. Right. We can also see the areas where they still could use some more support, and that can help us refine the modules themselves.
Right. I'm glad you thought of setting up that pre-test, because if I only taught using traditional methods, I wouldn't have remembered to set up that pre-test.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, maybe we should take a look at
Sure.
the data. So here is the post-test data. So you can see the number of students who completed it in the last version that this course was used. And this part here shows the percent of students getting each question correct. So you can really see on some of the items, they did really well.
Yes.
But there are a few items where students' performance was not so good.
Yep.
So sometimes what is a pretty efficient strategy is to first target the questions where students' performance was not so high, mm-hmm. and see if you, based on your experience teaching and your knowledge of the subject matter, can identify what might be going on, if there was a misconception, right. or if maybe the material was confusing, or if there's something we might want to do differently next time.
Yep.
So I think we can look at this question here. This is a question that is, what is the value returned by the following function?
Mm-hmm. That's a common problem. Students usually get confused between the function print and return, a return statement. So it's actually expected. Mm-hmm. I try to address this in the class, but the fact that it's still it still shows itself in the post-test makes me think maybe we should address it even more carefully.
We could. Now what we can do is we can go back to, do you know where in the course this material would have been addressed?
Right, the initial module.
Okay, so this is the module where that
right.
concept would be introduced,
yes.
right? This learning dashboard page shows students' performance and their learning during that initial exposure to that topic. So maybe we can dig in and see, is one of these more relevant to what we just talked about?
This may be the part.
Okay.
Let's try that first.
So this shows us, in this area, students were answering questions about defining and using their own straight line functions, mm-hmm. using built-in functions.
Yeah, the built-in functions would be most likely the place. Yeah.
So we can click on here and see students' performance on those items in the module was pretty strong.
Right.
Except for on this one.
Let's check that.
Yeah, let's view it in the course. So that's an interesting phenomenon that when they're first learning about this topic and they're focused on it, they seem to be doing quite well. But then when some time goes on,
right.
They need to retain that conceptual understanding and transfer maybe to a new situation like that print
right.
function.
Right.
It's a common challenge for students learning to retain and transfer what they've learned. Mm-hmm. So giving them even more practice and more distributed practice might be a good strategy.
Okay. So I could think of injecting similar questions in other modules?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So then they learn it here and they're doing well,
yeah.
but then you can come back to it and check their understanding
right.
and help them practice it and refine it.
Right.
We could see then if you make that change, if the post-test performance looks better.
Exactly, yeah,
next
let's
time.
try to do that next time. Yeah.
But in the meantime, let's see what this question holds. Similar, isn't it?
Yeah, the interaction between print and the return value of a function. Yes, that's
that was the
point.
one with the worst performance during
right.
the module.
Right, that's right. But if you compare how they did during the module on this problem with their performance on the post-test is slightly better.
A little bit better.
A little bit better. So
right.
that actually reinforces your
encouraging.
idea that, coming back to it.
More practice is a really good idea.
Okay.
In fact, even right around this page, since students were doing not so well on that item, maybe even having some more instruction or another activity right there, as well as the distributed practice.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
This is something we see a lot, that when faculty members are using an online instructional resource like OLI, they can target their instruction to the places where students need it most.
Right.
So that's a specific way we can look to edit the course and make it better for next time.
Yeah, I'll remember this one.
Great. Do you want to look at the post-test some more?
So if you look at this particular learning objective, all the students seem to have done pretty mediocre on that one.
Right.
Maybe it's me writing the activity. Maybe it's not a really well-designed activity that I should improve on.
So what this bar is showing is a lot of students did not do that much. That's why it's still gray.
Oh, okay.
And those students who did work on activities related to this learning objective, yeah, they didn't excel.
Yeah, exactly.
So one reason for that is just what you're saying, that maybe they did not have enough practice to get strong in that skill. Another hypothesis is that there were enough practice opportunities, but students were still struggling.
Yeah.
So we can click on this link here and see how many activities of practice were there.
Right, that's true.
And we can distinguish between those two hypotheses. And it looks like there were only really 3. So 3 practice opportunities may not be enough for students to master that skill.
Okay, that's good that we found that out.
Absolutely. So if we look at one of these, do you think there would be some other activities like this that you could add for practice?
Certainly, yeah, next time.
Great.